process. Thank you.
Simon O'Connor.
At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. And I think that is the context in which we debate this bill. And while I will turn some attention to the comments from the opposition, I think it's important to remind a previous speaker, Mr Chevelle, that, and not that I'm a military man myself, but the frontal attack onto an entrenched position using words like spiteful, hate and all of this is actually fraught with danger, and you'll get shot to pieces, not by me necessarily. Mr Speaker, this is an incredibly important bill. Every bill that comes before this House is important, and every bill in its nature is democratic as it's debated and discussed. And as I begin, I do want to take umbrage with the previous speaker and others from the Green Party in particular who have talked about this as being anti-democratic and not following the process and so forth. Well, I sort of think ipso facto the fact that we are standing here in this House progressing a piece of legislation through its readings, debating and discussing that by its nature it's democratic. But you see, the Greens betray themselves as they just made an earlier comment. Well, we're willing, Mr Speaker, to work with anyone. Well, yes, they are, so long as everyone agrees with them. And I might need to remind the Greens that that's not democracy. Democracy is about difference and debate and coming to a consensus. And it is, if I may use the words of Phil Twyford, sanctimonious to stand and lecture people that consensus means only accepting a particular viewpoint. And I think it's also most unfortunate people like myself and others have had to react tonight to this debate in what has been a really important discussion around a war memorial to honour our war dead. And I think it's important too, Mr Speaker, to acknowledge what generally has been a very positive debate. And I do want to acknowledge previous speakers, including from the Greens, who have uttered some very positive words, but particularly, Mr Speaker, from Labour, from New Zealand First, even if they might get their colleague's name wrong occasionally. I'll probably fall into that trap now myself. But some really positive statements here, because, Mr Speaker, it is important that we remember. And remembrance is an important element of our human nature, and an important part because to remember is an attempt to not repeat the mistakes. And, Mr Speaker, we stand in a house of memory here, and different speakers have talked about the plaques that are on the wall and acknowledged too the tragedies of the 5 deaths in recent weeks. Memory of these events are important. And so as we turn now to the National War Memorial, to the Carillon and the development of the park, it's important that we can create a space that enables us as Kiwis, as we approach 100 years, to remember. But in remembering, it's not just an action of the past, but an action now of the current. We have men and women serving overseas, fine men and women with families, who are there serving us and continuing. And so it's really important as we debate this bill, and as we remember in 2015, when this national park is opened, that we acknowledge not only those who have served us in the past, but those who can continue, Mr Speaker, to serve us now. Mr Speaker, there's been some discussion that there isn't enough due process. I think it's important quickly to turn to the Minister's first words of the array of discussions that have been had. Over 4 years. Over 4 years, the Minister reminds me there. Over 4 years of discussions with parties across the country here in Wellington. Vitally important to put that in context, because this is not an affront to the RMA. This is not an affront to previous legislation. This is an opportunity to take those discussions, to move it speedily through so we can rightly celebrate in 2015. I think it's important too to note that the role of the Governor-General, and as someone who's quite interested in things constitutional, I think it's important to note the role of the Governor-General is actually incredibly important and an essential part of New Zealand's constitutional and democratic structure. And orders in council are not unusual. And I think it's difficult to start scaremongering around that point. I just want to highlight that. But I want to return to the importance of the National Memorial. In 2015, we remember that 100 years ago, Kiwis and Australians landed on the shores of Gallipoli and that they gave our lives. And the very least we can do, Mr Speaker, here tonight is to move this bill through simply, gently and kindly, with dignity, and in a way that wasn't in a way that was not accorded, as we're now hearing from the opposition, and in a way that was not accorded to our men who landed on those shores. Mr. Speaker, in 2015, we will remember them, and tonight we begin that process. And again, it's lamentable that in doing so, we have, I think, brought some dishonour amongst them. But I hope that in finishing this speech tonight, we return some honour to those men, to those fallen, and that all of us here in this House will unite to celebrate in 2015 the building of this national park.
Excellent. Great.
The debate now having expired, I'll put the question. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Aye. The ayes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed. 13. Point of order, 13 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
8 votes in favour.
Maori Party.
2 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 vote opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 vote in favour.
United Future.
1 vote in favour.
Any other votes?
I know. The ayes are 105, the noes 14. The motion is agreed to.
National War Memorial Park, Pukeahu Empowering Bill, first reading.
The question is that the National War Memorial Park Pukeahu Empowering Bill be considered by the Transport and Industrial Relations Committee. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Honourable Chris Finlayson.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the National War Memorial Park Pukeahu Empowering Bill be reported to the House by 18 September 2012 and that the committee have authority to meet at any time while the House is sitting, except during oral questions, during any evening on a day on which there has been a sitting of the House, and on a Friday in a week in which there has been a sitting of the House, despite Standing Orders 188 and 1911B and C.
The question is that the motion be agreed